After testing Kubernetes locally to verify that all our pieces work together, we're now ready to deploy to the cloud. To do that, we'll need credentials, which generally take the form of a kubeconfig file. This application is going to have a staging cluster and a production cluster. For now, we'll use the kubeconfig file for staging. Any kind of setup would then need to be repeated for production. Let's check the Kubernetes service to make sure the kubeconfig file is set up correctly. We'll verify that the Kubernetes service is running, set the Kubernetes context and namespace, and call kubectl getAll to display any resources, which we can see there are none. Now that we know we can connect to Kubernetes, the next step is to set up the Docker credentials, so that Kubernetes will be able to pull the images that we deploy. When we were running Docker locally, Docker login was how we made sure we could pull images from the repository. For our Kubernetes cluster, we'll use a Kubernetes secret instead. Another one-time setup is to deploy MongoDB to our cluster. We do this using the kubectl apply command, and can see that the database is running from the output of the kubectl getPods command. Since our database is empty, let's run the setup script to populate it. We'll do that by executing a command on the Mongo pod. Our other two containers will be deployed automatically by Wercker. But first, we have to add the deploy pipelines to our worker.yaml files. Let's start with the API. We open the worker.yaml file for the API and add the deploy pipeline. This pipeline is pretty straightforward. We'll use the kubectl step and run the apply command. The deploy API.yaml file is the same one we saw before. The worker and token variables come from the kubeconfig file. These need to be set up in Wercker. We'll do that next. We've configured a deploy pipeline in our worker.yaml file, but we also need to add it using the Wercker UI. The Workflows tab is where our pipelines are defined. We've got our build pipeline, and we've been using it to build our code and push our Docker images. Now that we've configured a deploy pipeline in our worker.yaml, we can add that pipeline here. We'll actually create it twice, once to deploy to staging, and again to deploy to production. Let's click Add New Pipeline to continue. Let's start with staging. We'll call this pipeline deploy-staging, and of course its name in the YAML file is just deploy. The default hook type means this pipeline won't automatically run when a git commit is pushed. Click Create to create this pipeline. Now we'll take our kubeconfig file and turn it into the environment variables that Wercker needs to deploy our application to the right server and with the appropriate credentials. Let's take a peek at the kubeconfig file. The first thing we're going to do is create a variable for the server host and port. And after that, we're going to create another variable for the token. So let's create our first variable, Kates_server. And now for our second variable, Kates_token. We're going to make this one protected, so nobody will be able to see it after it's saved. These are the only variables we need to define. Of course, we'll want a separate pipeline called deploy production with values from our production kubeconfig file, but we don't need to do that right now. One last thing we need to do is commit the change we made to worker.yaml. And when we do, well, let's go take a look at what happens. We check our git status, verify our changes, then add, commit, and push our worker.yaml file. When we push the commit of worker.yaml, that started a build, and we see the results on the Runs tab. The build was done. This is the pipeline we've defined. Let's run the deploy staging action. This doesn't usually take very long to run. And there's the kubectl step. Looks like it worked. Now let's set up to deploy the front end. The deployment pipeline is similar to the one for the API, but it's using the node box. It has the same variables we used before. We'll set those up in the Wercker UI. We'll go to the Workflows tab of the front end app, and we'll create another pipeline called deploy staging. Now we can create our Kates server variable and our Kates token variable, and that's it. And again, we don't need to set up the deploy production pipeline right now. Now let's commit the change we made to this worker.yaml. We run the same git commands as before and push our worker.yaml change. Once again, the git push started a build. The build was done. Let's run the deploy staging action and wait for it to finish. It shouldn't take too long. Now if we look at Kubernetes, we should see everything running. We see all of our pods are running, and so are their corresponding services. Our web service has an external IP address. Let's try connecting to it with a browser. And it works. Learn more at cloud.oracle.com/containers/pipelines.